Welcome to our Sunday morning meditation class on behalf of IMCW, the Insight Meditation Community of Washington, and the Center for Mindful Living. We've had within IMCW, we've had a class on Sunday morning, and typically I taught from beginning when I started with IMCW back in 2003. So we're in our 23rd year, I think, 23rd or 24th year, and I started in with IMCW actually. I'm reminded of it by the Peace Walk, because we walked, when the monks were here in DC, we walked down from the cathedral to all the way down Embassy Row and onto George Washington University. And when I first got involved in IMCW in late 2002, we organized a silent peace walk down from the National Cathedral to the Islamic Center. I know some of you may have been around at that time. And it felt very kind of reminiscent, except a couple of things. The monks walked very fast, as you know. Very, very different from Thich Nhat Hanh's walking, which is very slow, and the monks the monks were walking, I think, at 4 miles an hour, 20 miles a day, and one of the things that it kind of got across to me very clearly was that it doesn't matter the speed of your walking, if you're present, or if you're not present, it doesn't matter if you're walking slowly and your mind is somewhere else, or you're walking quickly, but it's about what's going on within. And so that was a nice reminder of that. So welcome to today's class. We'll have, if anyone's new, please, love to hear from you in the chat. And I know many familiar faces here, regulars, and we'd love to welcome you if you are new, first time or second time. And the format of the class is fairly simple. We'll begin with a short meditation, maybe 15-20 minutes meditation. Then Emily will lead us in some mindful movement. Thank you as always, Emily, for your generosity and kindness. And then we'll have a talk. I want to share just some reflections today on the Walk for Peace, which had such a kind of a big impact, way beyond kind of the Buddhist community and out into the world, and just some reflections on why that could happen at this particular time, and how we might take that kind of the teachings and the wisdom and the energy forward as we as we move ahead. We're living in difficult times, as we know, and so just kind of some reflections. I'd love to hear from as many people as possible about your own thoughts, your own experiences around that. And then we'll have some time hopefully for sharing and for announcements, and then we'll finish for today. So again, welcome everyone. So we'll begin with a sit. So if you would like to begin by finding a comfortable, relaxed posture, sitting in a way where your back is straight, your shoulders, you might invite the shoulders to relax. Let your hands rest in your lap, on your knees, on your thighs, wherever is comfortable. If you like, you can let your eyes gently close, bring the attention inward. You might consciously just put to one side thoughts about the future, about the past, concerns you might have, things that are on your mind. Just put them to the side so that you can be as fully present here for the time we're sitting, the time we're together. And you can of course come back later. Just letting your attention be here, come into the body, feel the contact of your body with the surface beneath you, your hands in contact with your legs or your thighs, lap, or with each other. You might take a few longer, deeper breaths to help you arrive and settle. Take a nice full deep in breath, filling the chest, filling the lungs. Brief, hold it, pause, and then releasing, letting go. Long, slow exhalation. Then breathing in again. Breathing in, calming the body. Breathing out, calming the mind. So letting your breathing help you settle and arrive. You might bring a smile or a half smile to your face, just inviting the smile, which kind of in turn invites the body and the mind to relax and be at ease. So if it helps to think about someone who makes you feel happy, joyful, or a place or a time you feel joy or peace, just invite that into your mind and heart. And the invitation is to meet whatever is arising with an attitude of acceptance and kindness. As the poet Rumi speaks of welcoming the guests. Welcoming whatever's present, whatever's arising in the body, heart, the mind. So an attitude that's more of receiving what's present than controlling anything. We might invite a non-controlling attitude to our experience, allowing whatever is here to be here, to come, to stay for a while, and then when it's ready to pass. It can be helpful to just have a focus for your attention. And the mind has a tendency to kind of move off into the past or the future or somewhere else. And so having something we can just rest our attention on can be kind of helpful in grounding ourselves, in keeping us present. One of the most commonly used focuses or objects in meditation is our own breathing. So just letting the attention rest on the experience of the breath, the in-breath and the out-breath. Just riding the waves of the breath. Just receiving the breath. Feeling the air entering the nostrils and the chest and the belly rising, falling. And the warm air of the exhalation. In breath and out breath. And whenever you notice that the attention has gone off into plans or memories or daydreams or worries, you can just pause the thinking, and gently and kindly just incline the mind back to the breath, to the body. Here, now. And if something comes up that calls for your attention, in a strong or persistent kind of way, you can just gently let your attention go to that. Let's say there's a feeling of discomfort in the body. You can just let your attention go to where you're feeling that and just allow the sensations to come and go, just meeting them with kindness and with acceptance. Just making space for whatever is here. Just meeting what's here wholeheartedly, kindly. You could just stay with whatever the waves or the pulsing or throbbing or squeezing. Similarly, if there's a strong emotion, let's say there's a kind of a feeling of sadness comes, feels quite strong and calls for attention, you might just notice where you feel that in your body, maybe around the chest or around the eyes or the heart area. And just allow the sensations to come and go. Just be aware of them. So that everything can be included. And if something calls for attention, we can just give it the attention it needs. And when it's ready to pass, you can just gently and kindly come back to the body, come back to the breath. Whatever you're experiencing right now, can this be a moment of peace? Whatever the conditions are. Just consciously inviting peace into your heart. As the monks would say, this is my peaceful day. As Dorothy Hunt says, peace is this moment without judgment, this moment in the heart space where everything that is welcome. And we can begin again in any moment, no matter how many times the attention has gone off, or for however long we've been off somewhere else. We can just begin afresh, this breath, this feeling, this moment. Finish with this poem by Thich Nhat Hanh, For Warmth. I hold my face between my hands. No, I'm not crying. I hold my face in my two hands to keep the loneliness warm. Two hands protecting, two hands nourishing, two hands preventing my soul from leaving me in anger. Thank you, everyone. You know, what as I was mentioning earlier, I love to kind of talk and reflect about the phenomenon, the experience of the monks and their visit, their walk for peace, and get at some of the some of what was going on, what allowed it to become what it became. When they started, they thought it might, they might affect a few people on the way, and yet there was this thing in people in our area. You probably saw the front page of the Washington Post, the print copy, and there the front page was the National Cathedral and the monks coming in. I mean, that was kind of in terms of a phenomenon that, they did, if you were doing media work and you said, oh, our goal is to be on the front page, obviously that wasn't what they were doing it for, but, there was still this phenomenon in Washington. It was curious that the Washington Post, I don't think they had a story. I mean, they probably did in a kind of the metro or some area, but they didn't have a story that went with that picture, but they had the picture. So I'm really, I'm really been reflecting a lot on just of how they were able to, in a way, both meet a moment that we're living in and create a moment by what they did and the way they did it. And just out of interest, how many folks were there, or for any of the the walk? Quite a few. And how many followed online? I think probably many of us, probably most of us followed followed the walk online. And how many are following Aloka, the dog? Yes, we have a lot of dog lovers. Yeah. So Yeah, I'd love, I'd love to, have a chance to hear from folks. And if you'd like to, share in the chat what kind of, things that stood out for you, whether it's in person or online, that really touched you or struck you or, you know, brought some insight to you about things. I all I want to do really is kind of share some reflections and have a conversation. I hope about it because I think I think it was an important you could call it, I suppose, an event experience, not just not just that lots of people came out, but much more about how people were touched. That's kind of what I'm most interested in exploring. The way they were able to touch, and you could see it. If you were there, I was out two days in with at the cathedral and at the George Washington University and at the Lincoln Memorial the following day, and just to kind of witness the people and the variety of people that came out was very inspiring. It was inspiring to me, and so I'd love to hear from folks. Maybe yeah. Yeah. Nancy says, I listened online to one of the leading monks' talks and I was touched by his saying that each day when we wake up to say that today I will feel peace. Oh, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Is that Heather, you sharing that? Yeah. Um, uh, Sean says, I saw them in Mount Vernon and Annapolis. The Annapolis gathering was organized by the Lieutenant Governor and interfaith communities there. The monks and how people were touched by them shows how how starved and exhausted so many of us are by division and crave connection. That's lovely. Kind of one of the themes I wanted to touch on as well today. Rick says, I watch mostly on Instagram. It was interesting as my feed is usually items that get my blood pressure up. Feeding my rage. Then the monk's story would disrupt my feed and quite literally slow me down, mind and blood pressure included. That's lovely. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and please feel free, to share. And thank you for. I don't know if that's Shazzy or Heather with the sharing the photos, but that's lovely.
Phil's iPhone.
Ah, okay, okay, very good. Um, Susan says I was watching from Facebook from Berlin, Germany. Um, I'll I'll do some we'll have a chance to share. If you Valerie, if you want to share now you can, but we can have some sharing at the end. Yeah.
I can wait.
Okay, thank you, thank you, Valerie. And Mo, I'll just read a couple more and then kind of jump into talk the reflections. Mo says it felt like a wave of awakening across the country with each of their loving steps. Being with the patient group waiting for them to pass through my neighborhood and squishing in the crowd with so many happy and welcoming people felt like a big hug. That's really beautiful. Thank you, Mo, for sharing that. Christy, I overheard a lot of people talking in the crowds how they had, for the first time, started meditating. It was moving to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. That's great. Thank you, Christy. That's great to hear that. Ellie, it was so incredible for our younger ones, the next generation, to see how a movement invoked the world to pay attention, how to spread the message of peace. The momentum was incredible. Yeah, I had very similar kind of experiences and thoughts. I just one. I have a lot of vignettes, as I'm sure many. Make sure you muted everyone, as I'm sure many do. One was, as folks know, the I probably know the many people gave flowers to the monks as they passed, and one of the things they would do is they would give flowers back to people. And I was walking just behind the monks from the cathedral to GW, and one of the monks, there were a little group of teenagers, African American teenagers, probably about 14 or 15, waiting there. And one of the monks handed a flower to them, and the kid was so excited. It was like he'd won the lottery just by getting the flower. And it was just, just this feeling of, connection and a sense of something, something out of the ordinary. Terry says, my daughter invited me to go. In the 3 years I've been part of CML, she's never showed much attention. It was amazing to be there holding her hand. She felt the peace. Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Terry. That's really, really lovely. Yeah. So we'll have a chance to kind of share more. I just want to kind of outline some things and raise some questions and share some thoughts. So we we know the kind of the outline that the that the monks walked over a period of, it took 108 days to get to DC from Fort Worth, Texas, and they walked 2,300 miles. They walked 20 miles a day, averaging about 4 miles an hour, which is a kind of speedy walking pace every day. And they set out without any big expectations. Bhikkhu Panyakara, who was the leading monk, and the one most people saw and heard, giving talks and leading meditations. Very handsome man of about, I think, maybe 43, something like that. He's been a monk for, I think, something 19 years, something like that. That they didn't expect anything more than they hoped that they would have an impact on some few people as as they passed through. And they walked from Texas, where it was, I think, still pretty hot, and they walked from through Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, to DC, and then spend a day in Maryland as well. And what happened was, they something about their presence, their walking, their practice, and the sight of the fact that it was, these kind of monks, and there was the curiosity factor, obviously, of like, oh, what are they doing and why are they doing that? But once, getting beyond that, once people really saw and connected with what they were doing and why they were doing it, obviously doing it for walking for peace, um, really touched people's hearts in this deeply profound way, that the numbers coming out grew like a snowball, as things went on. They had difficult times, as people know, but most people probably know that they had an accident, a car ran into them, and one of the monks had to have his leg amputated, and so that was kind of very big blow. But they kept walking, and he was treated and joined he obviously didn't join the walking, but he joined the monks at, towards the end, and was there in Washington. And I was I was very moved that Bhikkhu Panyakara was always very, where is he now, and they brought him up on the stage at, at the Lincoln Memorial, and so there wasn't a big expectation. I don't Bhikkhu Panyakara, the main kind of the leader of the group, in the sense, the giving the teachings and leading the walk most of the way. He spoke about how, excuse me, how the walk began with a thought. And he talked about this, he gave as a teaching. He said it came as a thought, and we can have thought. And this is what he says: we can have thoughts, and some of our thoughts are not very good thoughts. Some of the things are like we're angry or we want to do harm to somebody, and and then it can be really serious if we act on those thoughts. If we have those thoughts and we don't deal with them in a wise way, then we could cause all sorts of damage, and we can see lots of examples of that in the country and in the world, about how people have thoughts, unwholesome thoughts, and then they act on the thoughts, and how much harm that can do. It can start wars. It can, create great conflict. But he said, I had this thought, and I thought about the thought. He said, I reflected on it. He had the thought, and it came up in meditation. And this thought came up, given everything that's going on in the country, it would be a good idea. It would be a good idea to have a walk for peace. So he sat with this thought, as a kind of a meditation, as a reflection. And he said, I decided that this was a good thought to have. And so and to turn it into an act, into an idea, into practice. And he then went to his abbot, his teacher, Venerable Ratanaguna, and asked for permission to embark on this walk, to invite other monks from other monasteries in the area to start this walk, to go on this walk. And then they began the walk and decided how far they would go, what would the end point be, and all of this. And so this was an example of a wholesome thought turning into something that was way beyond even what he imagined it would be. He wasn't thinking, we'd get tens of thousands of people out and meet with, be greeted by governors, senators, Congress members, bishops, imams, rabbis, ministers, and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of ordinary people, regular folks, who came out. My personal experience was obviously online, but in person was at the cathedral, and at the Lincoln Memorial the next day. So the 2 days they were in Washington, and one of the well, I think I want to just share a little about what were the teachings, and then I want to share a little bit about a kind of an experience and share that with you. What they brought and what they taught is what many people in America and around the world, are able to hear, on a regular basis, either in person or online, teachings of peace and mindfulness, loving kindness, interconnection, and yet they were able to, to make this into they were able to impact people way beyond the folks who would normally come to a meditation class, to a retreat, to a mindfulness program. Um, and I think it was really through kind of the really through embodying the teachings that they were embodying, like walking the walk, walking the talk. They were able to walk it and demonstrate it. And that was, I think, an extraordinary power that it had, just this walking. I mean, the teachings were our central Buddhist teachings, the teachings of peace not being something that depends on external conditions, and really just pointing and saying to people, I'm not bringing you peace. Bhikkhu Panyakara would often say, I'm not bringing peace. We're not bringing you peace. We can't bring you peace. But we can point to, we can invite you to look at the peace that is always available in your own heart, and to be, and that teaching, to be able to just kind of point in that way and invite people, like they would, as they would say, this is, as he would say, write down every day, this is my peaceful day, this is my peaceful day, and to really invite people to turn inward. That was an extraordinarily powerful teaching, particularly the way they shared that teaching. This is my peaceful day. Peace is available to all of us. And I think, excuse me, and I think, what was really important is the way that those teachings, the teachings of peace, teachings of mindfulness, of focusing on slowing down, paying attention to the present moment, here and now, embodying that in their walk, the teachings of loving kindness and compassion, encouraging us to cultivate compassion, loving kindness towards all beings, including, non-humans, including those who followed them along the way and heckled them, and said, you're going to go to hell. They still met those folks with kindness and with compassion. And I think the fact that that we are so divided, that everything tends to go, are you on this side, or are you on this side? And we go towards the ones that kind of like, oh, they're on our team, and we're we're so caught up in conflict. I think the fact that they were able to kind of reach below the conflict to something that is deeper, that brings us all together despite our differences. And they were able to do that in practice. They were able to point to the possibility that we can live together, that we can, remember our interconnection, even if we have deep political differences, deep differences about, all sorts of things, that there's something connecting us that is much deeper than those divisions. Doesn't mean we have to get rid of what we believe in or what we care about, but that we have to see that even that beneath those differences is unity, is what we all have in common, that we all have in common. And it's really the bodhisattva view, the bodhisattva understanding that all beings, might say, have Buddha nature. We all have the potential to awaken. So even if somebody is doing harmful things and we may disagree with them very deeply, that nonetheless they are, our siblings. They are, part of the beloved community, using the term that Martin Luther King and others have used, of the vision of us all living together in harmony. And this, I think, the monks were able to convey that, but also embody it, because the embodiment, I think, was really important. They walked the walk. They walked mindfulness. They walked mindfully and embodied mindfulness. They walked with kindness, with loving kindness. The way they, you could see the way they interacted, a bit like the Dalai Lama, when whoever he meets, whether they're, a world leader or whether they're, the janitor, the cleaner, the same level of respect as to see people's Buddha nature. And I think that the monks really embodied that. They conveyed it as a teaching in a way, but mostly through really embodying it. Teachings of peace, of mindfulness, of loving kindness, of interdependence, our inexorable, connections with each other, that we're all part of the web of life. That wonderful quote from Martin Luther King about we're bound up in this web of destiny. I can't remember the whole quote, but you'll be familiar with it. What Thich Nhat Hanh spoke of as our interbeing. He said, we inter are. This interconnection is a verb, really. We know we're connected with each other, and the more we recognize this interconnection, this interbeing, the more we can become an instrument of peace in the world. And I think they were able, and to really convey the teachings in ways that people, didn't feel that they were being, oh, you should believe this, or you should become a Buddhist. And they often said, I'm not, we're not interested in you becoming, Buddhists. As others would say, I don't think they said this, but what they really were interested in is that people become Buddhas. That people see, remember their Buddha nature rather than becoming any kind of an ist, a Buddhist or a Christian or a Jew or Muslim or whatever it might be, or any other, or political views or whatever. There's something about the walking that I think is really powerful. It's been historically, walks have played an important role in the Buddhist tradition and in other traditions as well. The Cambodian monk Maha Ghosananda in the, I think, 80s and 90s, the 1980s and 90s, would organize walks peace walks in Cambodia after the overthrow of the Pol Pot regime. The country was still very divided, and there were landmines all over the place. And he organized, people to walk for peace throughout Cambodia. That was one example. This wasn't the first peace walk, certainly for Bhikkhu Panyakara, because he did a peace walk in India, and that's where they met Aloka, the peace dog, a stray dog, but who they bonded, and it's very, very moving, just the affection between the monks and Aloka. And some of you may have seen when Bhikkhu Panyakara, if you haven't seen it, check it out on social media. When Bhikkhu Panyakara went back to his monastery in Fort Worth, Texas, he has two other dogs. And guess what their names are? Karuna and Mudita, which translate as compassion and sympathetic joy. Two of the four heart practices, loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. And it's the two middle ones, karuna and and mudita. And I think I had a license plate that had one of those. I know La Sarmiento had one. I think it was Karuna La had. But no, I think I had Sangha as a. Anyway, so walks, yeah, walks have been a very have played an important role in Buddhist and other traditions. Think of Mahatma Gandhi, he in 1930 and other times as well, but the big one was the Salt March in 1930 after the British, very much like the American Revolution, I think, the British imposed taxes on salt and people needed salt and they couldn't buy and sell salt, and there was a tax put on salt, and so Gandhi organized the salt march, and to no taxation without representation, then and ultimately led to the British being ejected from India and independence. And I mentioned, we did. I did a. I didn't mention this, but I did a peace walk across Israel back in 2002 or 2003 from Jaffa to Jerusalem. I didn't organize this, but I participated. We took a week to walk across. It was very similar. It was a little bit slower walking. Israel isn't isn't that big a country, and to walk across, and there are probably 50 or 60 of us, and as well as we did the one we used to do the walks around the White House after the Iraq War started, and again we didn't have banners saying Bush is bad, but rather just something like peace in our hearts, peace in the world. So there was something about walking and the monks walking together, and I think I think the timing of the walk was really important, to choose to do a walk, and something that was strenuous and difficult, that required real determination and a willingness to put up with hardship. A number of the walks, the monks were walking barefoot. People remember the storm a couple of weeks ago. I mean, it's a pretty intense storm to walk through, and yet they persisted. This sense of determination. I think that was helpful in conveying. This is serious, and the message of peace at a time of division, the message of peace conveyed in the way they were able to convey that message of peace, through their own embodying of peace and loving kindness and mindfulness. I think was instrumental in kind of in touching so many people's hearts and leading this to be such a such a I don't want to say kind of it doesn't really matter whether a million people came or 10,000, but something that touched people in a very 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 real way and a very wide scale way. And I'm thinking, timing is really important, to kind of meet the time that we're in with actions and practices and things to do that can make a difference. I think is really really important, and they did that. They had a message and a way of conveying the message that really spoke to and speaks to the time we're living in right now. Because even, many of us are very committed to action and political engagement, hopefully, not from a place of division or hatred, but nonetheless of, saying this is a better way to go, and this is a not good way to go, without getting too much into the detail. Many people of all different persuasions now feel that the actions of ICE and the detentions and the deportations, at least the way it's being carried out, is unconscionable, is wrong. And so many of us care deeply about that and are engaged in that. And that does bring a kind of duality, that certain, this way is better than that way, and it was interesting that that I mean, not just interesting. I think it was important that the message of the monks didn't get into that, we're with this and we're against this. It was really that we're, that peace is underneath all of this. There's peace. Underneath all of this, there's loving kindness. Underneath all of this, there's the inexorable interconnection, interbeing between all of us. So, as another kind of, as a vignette, some of you may have, I don't know if you have seen in the cathedral, there was a kind of kind of Q&A between the monks and religious folks there, and an imam was the first to be recognized, and he asked the question, what, your message is one of peace and inner peace, and that's obviously what he was saying is that's very positive, but what about how does it relate to working for justice in the world? Basically we're saying it's important for us to work for justice as well. And Bhikkhu Panyakara, it was an important question to ask, I think, because I believe that we need to cultivate peace in our own hearts, but we also need to act to engage in the world in ways that can, alleviate suffering. And so it was going to be interesting how Bhikkhu Panyakara answered that question. But what he did was he said, we have Bhikkhu Bodhi here with us. Bhikkhu Bodhi, as probably many of you know, is the leading living translator of the Buddhist teachings into English. He's the translator of, talk about a big book, and you maybe can't see it, quite how big this book is. It's like 2,000 pages, the connected discourses of the Buddha, the middle length discourses of the Buddha, not quite as big as the other one. I've got my thing on blur, but so he said, I'd like Bhikkhu Bodhi to come up and answer this question. And I think this is the way, I think I can do it like this, but I'd like to, if it's only 2.5 minutes, and I'll see if I can do it. So I don't have the question here because I recorded it just when Bhikkhu Bodhi came up, but let's see. I'm just gonna, so you get the video. I'm gonna unblur myself, so then, yeah, that's better. So I'm gonna play this if I can. Here we go.
It's a very extremely important question, because in my opinion, in the situation that we are facing in this country and around the world, Inner peace is certainly an essential requirement, but we also need justice. Because what we see taking place in this country right now, I have to tell you, I'm 81 years old. I grew up during the period of the 1960s, when we had the civil rights movement, 1964, 65, voting rights, civil rights. Wow, the country is opening up, losing its heritage of racism and discrimination. The anti-war movement against the war in Vietnam, we're coming to an era of peace. Then early 1970s, the feminist movement, women's rights are coming to the front of our social consciousness. And now what are we facing? I have to say, sadly, it's almost a reign of terror, where people are being terrified. School children afraid to go to school from fear that they're going to be grabbed off the streets and sent to a prison or detention camp. Workers afraid to go to work. Families being torn apart. So it seems that we have to balance this inner peace with what I call a strong commitment to conscientious compassion. That is compassion inspired by a sense of conscience, a responsibility for the welfare of all our fellow citizens, all the residents of this country, and indeed a universal compassion for all human beings around this world. And we have a look at here. All sentient beings around the world. Yeah, so we have to combine the quest for inner peace with this conscientious commitment out of compassion to ensure justice and promote really the well-being, safety, and security of people who are in trouble, endangered.
Thank you, Bhante.
It's a very extremely important question, because in my opinion,
There we go. I think it was wonderful that that both that Bhikkhu Bodhi was present, that Bhikkhu Bodhi, that Bhikkhu Panyakara had the kind of insight or the kind of thought to the Bhikkhu, maybe he'd prepare it in advance or whatever, if kind of more political kind of questions came up, that Bhikkhu Bodhi was there, because it would have been, I think Bhikkhu Panyakara might have kind of given a more general a statement, but the fact that Bhikkhu Bodhi could be there and just say in 2.5 minutes, give a very compact kind of vision of engaged Dharma, engaged Buddhism, and was really, really important. I'm going to finish up so that we have a little time for sharing, just with a reflection that the monks. The teachings that the monks shared were not different than any, teachings that, you would hear in, here or other similar places. They're teachings of the mind and the heart, of teachings of wisdom and compassion, of clarity, of kindness. The two wings of the bird, of wisdom and compassion. But I think the most important thing they did was they touched people's hearts. It wasn't that so much the understanding as, people connected on a heart level. And I think that was what was so really powerful. They touched into something that we all crave, I think. We crave in a good way, not the bad kind of craving, but we all crave connection with each other. We want to get beyond the divisions and beyond the conflict. We want to recognize the goodness in others, and not be caught up in division and conflict. And they were able to point to the fact that we don't need to change the external situation in order to be peaceful, that we can find that within ourselves, and we can work for, for peace in the world beyond ourselves. And so that I think, and what I think I kind of alluding to this earlier, they really identified a moment, a time that we're living in, and they created a moment by doing the walk at a time when people were really kind of primed by the reality that we're living in, to be open and to be ready. In Spanish, you could call it a coyuntura, a conjuncture, a coming together of conditions with the message and with the action. And that, I think, really contributed to just this huge outpouring of connection, of care, of engagement, really, with the monks and their teachings. And the other thing I think, for me, was really, just at the center of it all, is that they brought people together beyond the differences, so that you could feel, all the police officers who would welcome them and walk with them. And that Bhikkhu Panyakara had all of the, the badges from all of these different police departments or fire departments, etc. People from all walks of life, and I think it kind of touched, it warmed the hearts of many people.